Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make this beautiful star bread at home. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. Today's bread may look intricate and complicated, but don't be overwhelmed. If you follow my steps, I guarantee yours is going to turn out just like the pictures. Let's go ahead and get started. Now let's start with our liquid. You're going to need 1 cup of whole milk, and we are going to add 1/3 cup of water to this. Now this is a yeast bread, so we're going to need to activate that yeast with a warm liquid. So we're going to take this over to our microwave where we will heat it until it reaches a temperature that's between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You always want to stir the mixture before you take the temperature. Now we'll want to add this to a large mixing bowl. You can absolutely make this recipe by hand, but today I'm using my favorite kitchen appliance, my stand mixer. You'll need 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast for this recipe, so we'll just sprinkle that over the milk mixture. And I also like to add just a pinch of sugar just to help the yeast activate a little faster. I do like to just give that a quick mix to make sure everything's combined, and we'll let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes or until our mixture has a nice foamy yeast cap on it. If your mixture does not look like mine, most likely your yeast is dead. You're going to have to toss it out and start over. After about 5 to 10 minutes, we can add 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. We'll add 5 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter, and you don't want this to be too hot when you add it. We'll also add 1 large egg plus 1 egg yolk. That extra egg yolk adds a little bit of extra tenderness to our bread. We'll also add 2 teaspoons of table salt. And for this whole recipe, you're going to need about 5 cups of flour, but for now, we're just going to be adding 2 cups into our mixing bowl. Now stir everything together until it's well combined, and I don't like to use my mixer just yet because it's a little bit large and it doesn't mix everything well, not until I add more flour. So I'm just gonna use my spatula to mix everything together. So now we can go ahead and attach our dough hook. And with our mixer on low speed, we're going to gradually add that remaining 3 cups of flour. Now my mixer is still having a little bit of trouble getting the sides right now, so I'm just going to be pausing occasionally to scrape the sides of the bowl because I want all of that flour to get worked in. Now here is an important note with flour. Anytime you're making yeast bread, the amount of flour you actually need is most likely going to vary. I'm going to be gradually adding flour until I get the right consistency for the dough. Now in just a second, I will show you exactly what that looks like. Now we'll continue to add this flour until we have a dough that is slightly tacky to the touch, but not so sticky that it comes off on your fingers. So as you can see right now, this is still too soft. Now I've added all 3 of my additional cups at this point. You may not need this much, but it's also possible you could need more. How's that for being nice and vague? So I'm going to continue to add flour about a spoonful at a time until we get the consistency we're looking for. Once our dough is beginning to cling to itself on the beater, it's pulling away from the sides of the bowl, and if we touch it, as you can see, it's still a little bit tacky, but it's not so sticky that it's coming off on my fingers or that it's unmanageable. This is perfect. Turn your mixer to low speed, and we are going to let the mixer do the heavy lifting and knead this dough for another 5 minutes until it is smooth and elastic. So this is perfect, so we're going to transfer this to a lightly oiled bowl. I just like to run a little bit of olive oil around the sides and bottom. Let's transfer this to our bowl. We'll cover this with plastic wrap and we'll set it in a warm, draft-free place to rise until it's doubled in size. For me, this usually takes about 1 to 2 hours. Once your dough has risen, we can transfer it to a clean surface. Now, if your dough is sticking to your fingers or the countertop, you can lightly dust the surface with a little bit of flour, but you don't want to overdo it. Now I'll divide this dough into 4 even pieces. And I'm going to form each one into a nice round disc. We'll set these aside and cover them with plastic wrap, and we're going to let them rest for about 15 minutes. Meanwhile, we can prepare our filling. Now you're going to need 6 tablespoons of softened, unsalted butter for this recipe, so you want to go ahead and get that out now. If yours is still a little bit cold, you can pop it in the microwave because you want it to be really easy to spread on your dough. Now in a separate bowl, we're going to combine a ½ cup of firmly packed light brown sugar, a tablespoon of ground cinnamon, and I like to add just a pinch of salt, about an 1/8 teaspoon. We'll stir this together until it's nicely combined. Switch over to my whisk so I can break up those brown sugar clumps. So you can set your filling ingredients aside and we'll go ahead and start working with one of our rounds of dough, so long as it's had 15 minutes to rest. So we'll go ahead and transfer this to a lightly floured surface. We'll use a rolling pin to roll this into an even 11-inch circle. Now, of course, I can't roll an even circle to save my life, so I'm just gonna do the best I can. Dough is a little bit sticky, so I'm going to dust it with a little bit of flour. You can use as much flour as you need, but again, don't overdo it. Now we'll transfer this to a parchment paper lined pizza pan, or you can use a baking dish. I like to use a pizza pan because it doesn't constrict my star any. So now grab your softened butter and we'll spread 2 tablespoons over the surface of this dough. This butter is a little bit cold still, so I'm just gonna pop this in the microwave. Makes it a lot easier that way. So grab your cinnamon sugar mixture now and sprinkle about 1/3 of that over the butter. I just use my hands, and then I'll use my hands to just lightly spread that over the surface. I just eyeball this, I don't measure it. So set that aside and let's go ahead and roll out another portion of our dough. And we'll repeat with more butter and more cinnamon and sugar. Of course, we'll do the same thing with our next round of dough. This one's a little bit messy, but don't worry, everything's going to come together in the end. Like I said, if I can do this, you guys can do this. We'll top this with the rest of our butter and the rest of our cinnamon sugar mixture. Now for our last piece of dough, we'll roll that out, of course, just like the others. But we are not going to be topping this one with any cinnamon and sugar or butter, which is good because we should be all out at this point. So here's where you get to fix things if you're like me and you can only roll out amoebas instead of nice, pretty circles. Go ahead and grab yourself a pair of kitchen shears or a nice sharp knife, and we can just trim up the edges. You want all 4 of your circles to line up really well, and you want the edges to be nice and rounded. Now let's make the center for our star. I like to use a biscuit cutter, but you could use a cookie cutter or even a small glass. And this is about a 2-inch cutter. This is just going to mark the center. I'm just going to press it lightly right in the center of that circle. And as you can see, I didn't press all the way through. I just made a nice little indent. And now using that as our center point, I'm going to cut this dough into quadrants, but I'm not going to cut into or through that circle. Now I like to mark the dough before I cut it because I like these quadrants to be nice and even. See, that one's a little crooked. And usually I use kitchen shears because it's easiest. We're going to need a total of 16 pieces, so once you have your quadrants, you'll need to cut each of those into 4 additional pieces. To do this, I like to cut each quadrant in half, and then cut each of those halves in half again. Okay, so here is where the magic happens. To make your beautiful star, you will want to firmly grip 2 pieces of the bread that are next to each other, and we are going to twist those away from each other once. We'll twist them away from each other a second time, and then we'll go about halfway. So that's about 2.5 turns away from each other. Now with these end pieces, we are going to very, very firmly press them into each other. Now be very firm and deliberate about this because if you don't form that end piece of your dough together really well, it's just going to bake apart in the oven. And we'll just do this all the way around our bread. So I hope yours is looking as beautiful as this one is right now. We're going to cover it with a clean towel, and we're going to let it rest again in a warm, draft-free place for another 30 minutes. While it's resting, go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, once your dough has rested for 30 minutes, I personally like to brush it with a little bit of egg wash. Now, an egg wash is just 1 egg mixed with about a teaspoon of water. Now this step is optional, but my favorite finishing touch is to sprinkle a little bit of coarse or turbinado sugar evenly over the bread. You guys know I don't go light on the sugar. Now this will need to bake for about 20 to 24 minutes. It should be a beautiful golden brown color on top when it's finished. And that is how you make a beautiful show-stopping star bread completely from scratch. I'm so excited for you to try this one. Please let me know what you think when you try it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. It's such a shame to actually eat it after you've done all that work. No, it's worth it.